let's do it. I'm Black Hannibal, running through your capital on elephants. Civilized a savage with my elegance. Militant intelligence, run through your defense. Strike like a ninja, slice, cut, and injure. Leave no prisoners, just bodies on the battlefield. I'm Spartacus with a sword and shield. Something like a marksman with cold blue steel. War paint on my face, keep my identity concealed. Advance on your camp like dozens of killer ants. Snatch your king like chess, checkmate, this is death. While my team have fun with your queen. Throw your bishops off the roof, your knights flee the scene. I plant bombs in the home of your pawns. The detonation shook the foundation of your rooks. Holding shotguns with double barrels. They impact so hard when it blasts through your body travels. Street Spartacus. Black Spartacus. Black Spartacus. Black Spartacus. Black Spartacus. Black Spartacus. Burn your flag as I overthrow your government. New politics, no Democrats and Republicans. Spiritual systems built by wise men who's true in living. The foundation's no longer Christian. Teaching universally the wisdom of the nations. New currency, no more dollar bills with white faces. No more Caucasian domination. All races participating, cultivating education. The people hungry and they ain't waiting. No more debating. Let's overthrow the haven to Satan. This whole world needs some new changes. Rulers with new faces. It's time to take out the racists. Spartacus from the new ages. From the page to the stage, pull a blade on the money changers. Spartacus from the new ages. From this page to the stage, pull a blade on the money changers. Yeah. What's going on, y'all? What's going on? Peace, power, and prosperity. Rob Blackstorm here. I have a special guest today. I'm very, very, very excited. This is a profound teacher. One of my teachers, I humbly say, from metaphysics to occultism to spirituality. This man, I think, has 2 guns loaded for the mental, the physical, and he's ready to blaze. This book behind me, the Homey and Modern the Homey, modern classic, I would say. This book not only has impacted me, but it has given me different perspectives. And for a person like myself, I am a person who is a critical thinker. So I just don't take things that I see or I hear and just run with them randomly. I really like to research and go in depth and make sure that it is something that is going to help me, not just tantalize my mind or, give me some false sense of pride. And I think with this work, it's going to people who have read this or are going to read this is going to change the game for the sincere speaker, the sincere seeker of spiritual truth. So without further ado, I'm going to add my guest, the Honorable Adika Butler.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Peace, King. What's going on?
It's good.
Oh, man, I've been looking forward to this interview this discussion for a while, brother. I met you in real time a couple of times. We bumped into each other in the streets of New York. It's
That's
always
right.
been honorable.
That's right.
And I've always felt like those meetings were kind of like kind of mystical entanglement, so to speak. We've always passed good words to each other, and you inspired me to put forth my first book that I wrote in concordance with Suche Dula. So I want to thank you for the inspiration as well. This book has me inspired to write a whole new book.
Wow.
I've been on Facebook and Instagram, and the way my mind and this, even me going back, preparing for this particular discussion with you and looking back at the book, like I got my highlighters right here. I went back and re-highlighted it. Like I read books and then I'll go back and highlight certain, or I'll highlight it while I read it. Then I'll go back and read the highlighted parts again to get more out of it. But this, I went back into it again. I even reread another chapter.
Indeed.
So
much appreciated, bro.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So this isn't about me. So I want to get started. I want to ask you, tell the people who you are, your mission, and just let's start with the beginning. who are you, and how did you get into, you know, how did you get into spiritual, spiritual truth, following the path, or even having the what pulled you into, being a seeker of knowledge, especially because, in the book you tell your age, and at the time when you were doing this study, spirituality is very popular now. Mysticism and occultism is very popular now. But at the time you were doing this, it was not very popular. In fact, it was shunned upon. Me, myself, being vulnerable, I stepped away from it a little bit because I was like, I didn't have any peers or anybody who really understood it. And I felt like I was always the weirdo. So it kind of pushed me away from it until for a while. Then I eventually came back. But talk to me about, what was the magnet that pulled you into the spiritual truth and understanding?
I was literally called. You know what I'm saying? I always like to begin by, just talking about my background because it's so critical to who I am and who I've become. Pretty much, when I was, like initially, I mean, when I look at my background and I look at, like where I grew up, I'm from Flatbush, Brooklyn. I was born in the late 70s, and I came of age, during the 80s, which was, as many people can imagine, a very turbulent and interesting time in the Big Apple, New York City. And where I grew up, I was raised in a Rastafarian household, at a time where people kind of had an idea of like what Rastafarianism was about, but it was still, even in that time, looked upon as, like what are these people about? You know what I mean? Like, like I remember being in school and, like having my dreadlocks and, being treated like, I was an extraterrestrial pretty much because I was like, like the only child, like who had that look, and it was just so uncommon, like people would listen now and be like, well, what's the big deal about dreadlocks? But the early 80s, middle 80s was a different time.
It was a different time.
I would get called spaghetti head and all kind of names.
Right.
But the beautiful thing about my experience and upbringing was that, as it relates to the topic, at hand, is that I was exposed to many different schools of thought. You know what I'm saying? Like, my mom, like would have like a big map on the living room wall, and I was able to get familiar with different parts of the world. Like I would look at, the African continent, Asia, Europe, of course, the Americas. And, there was always like books everywhere. I remember she put me on to Dr. Ben when I was about maybe 12 years old.
Oh, man.
When I was like, I wasn't like a heavy reader. I'm not going to, make it seem like I was, but I was familiar with who he was. And I would skim through Black Man of the Nile, which is a book that I still have to today, which is, the original book she gave me, which she bought in the early 70s. She bought that when she was in high school.
Blue and white cover. Yeah.
Blue and white. Yeah. And she gave that to me when I was like, maybe 12. So I would look through it and, I would see, oh, this god Osiris, like, he looks ill, you know what I mean? And I would read about this Egyptian mystery system, which I think he called the Osirica. I'm not exactly sure because it's been a while since I looked at the book, but I used to like go through that book a lot. And then I remember hearing him speak on, I think it was WLIB, which was a talk radio station I used to air in New York City. And it was pretty much the sister station to WBLS, which used to play a lot of urban, Black music at the time. So when I was, like getting into all of that, I was really, I would say like my imagination was sparked, so to speak. Like I was learning about all of these different things. I grew up hearing like Farrakhan speeches, being played in the home. Of course, I was familiar with a lot of aspects of Rastafarianism. You know what I mean? We used to have like some of my father's friends, like they would, like come over to the house and, they would, engage in their reasonings and they would talk about current events. And it would be, like really passionate, talks about how, the Black man is going to, like rise to the top and we're going to like get through all of the, the BS that we, going through as a people. And I'd be like just sitting by, like listening to them reason. or as the 5%ers would say, listen to them build. And, different language, different terminology, but it was the same concept.
So this is in your like teenage years, basically.
Nah, this is me as a kid.
Oh, okay. Like
Yeah.
preteen?
Yeah, like I'm jumping back and forth. Like when
Gotcha.
my mom gave me that book, I was like maybe 12 years old. But like talking about like, like watching my dad and his, friends reason in the house, like that was me when I was like, like 5 years old, 6 years old, 7 years old. So, this was the type of thing that was going on. And being a young man, like coming into my teens, especially in junior high school, a lot of those things were not central. They were not of central importance to me. Like I was just like any young black, like male coming of age, being 13, 14 years old. I'm into, I was just getting out of like my hyper like wrestling phase. I was getting more into like basketball, like how to dress. What else? Hip hop music, of course, was something that was, like taking me by storm. And yeah, that's where I was. But, I always had that knowledge, like in my back pocket, so to speak. But then I remember when I graduated from high school and like going into college, I was in this interesting space where I was really just wondering about, like what was next for me, like what my life was, like going to be about outside of, like what I was going to go to college and major in, like just who was I, like what was I about? And I had this strong feeling that there was a part of me that I was familiar with that I forgot about. And I needed to become more acclimated with it. And, like with that, I just started saying, I don't know what this is. I don't know what this is about, but I need to like just really figure out what this feeling is, what this impulse is, what this driving me is that I'm feeling to learn about other information that pretty much dealt with the nature of our reality. Like, what is reality? Because I felt like there was something behind what I was experiencing, if that makes any sense. So I just started going to this bookstore called A&B Books, downtown Brooklyn. It was a hot spot, for people looking for, what you would call conscious books back in the 90s. And even I think the early 2000s, they were still around. They may have closed like maybe around 2005, 2006. Not exactly sure, but I think they closed around that time. But I got there like in 97 and I just went to the bookstore. I had no clue what I was looking for. And I just allowed the books to pick me. And I started reading books like, Behold the Pale Horse and Illuminati 666, stuff like that. That was more about conspiracies. And, that was a beginning point for me in terms of like reacclimating myself into the body of knowledge, independent of what my parents were spoon feeding me. So that was me like more taking it upon myself to learn. And,
not to interrupt you, but real quick, that posed a question in my mind and spirit. Do you think part of the journey, because so you see a lot of people that are coming up in spirituality right now. Do you think part of the journey is the because I went through the same thing. I read when you brought up the books, Illuminati 666, Behold, like I read those same books. I feel like around the same time. Do you think now in modern day time, do you think that's like a prerequisite to conspiracy theories and learning about Mount Weather and alien? Do you think that's prerequisite to the inner before you get to the inner journey?
Not necessarily. I think it was for me because when I started that aspect of my journey, I felt at that time like I had a very for my age, I had a very good foundation in terms of like my spirituality was concerned, in terms of just having like a basic conceptualization about the creator and the most high, what I mean? Like I used to read the Bible. I used to like engage in like a very rigorous study of the Bible, but I was not a Christian, you know what I mean? I was coming at it from more a perspective of like, like you and I are the people, you and I are the descendants of the people that are being spoken of in that Bible. Mm-hmm. So that's how I grew up from the jump, you know what I mean? Like that was, like how I was raised. But, I had that aspect. I was familiar with the esoteric side from an ancient Egyptian standpoint. I think for me, what it was that I was starting to question the nature of reality. And because I knew that there was a divine aspect to reality, the question for me wasn't so much in the divine aspect. It was more dealing with like the day to day, like why is society structured the way that it is? You know what I mean? Why are the people who run for president, why do they have like similar views and perspectives? You know, these were just like general questions that I was, you know, like asking about myself, more from a socio-political standpoint, because that was the aspect of life that I was observing that I was curious about, but I didn't really have a strong foundation in, but I wanted to know more because I saw how it was affecting my life. Like, why were, you know, like a lot of the music that I was listening to, like why was it dealing with, you know, like a lot of violence and, you know, like drug dealing and, you know, like just braggadocio stuff about things that if we're really healthy people, you know, we shouldn't even really be proud of. You know what I mean? So I was like questioning all of these things. And for me, the whole conspiratorial perspective, New World Order, you know, was just a way in. And, you know, it didn't, it was also very significant that, you know, a lot of the like the hip hop literature that I was reading, the music that I was listening to was like dropping, you know, like little gems here and there. You know, like you had the Goody Mob with their song, you know, who's there peeping out the window? Like they were making references to like New World Order. And I was like, New World Order, what is this? And I remember being a young person, even before my late teens, when I was even in junior high. I remember George Herbert Walker Bush giving a speech, you know, that I remember seeing on TV, and he made reference
to a
New World Order.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what it was, but I remember as a young person, it sounded like gangster to me, like a New World Order.
Who thought we'd be living in it, Adika? Who thought we'd be living in the New World Order
like
right
me,
now?
You got to keep in mind, just to give you some context, like I was raised on Transformers and G.I. Joe and Cobra, la, 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 la. Like I was raised on all of that. So when I heard like, we are looking to establish a new world order, like it just sounded very Cobra Commander.
It's very Cobra. It's very Cobra-like.
Yeah. So I mean, all of these different things, like I'm jumping back and forth in the timeline, like from my early teens to my late teens. But when I was in my late teens, you're like, I'm processing all of this information, and I'm just saying to myself, like wow, like there's just a different level of reality that I needed to know about. And the conspiratorial stuff did connect a lot of dots for me. It did introduce me to a lot of things that was, you know, very significant. And that was really a powerful time for me because my imagination was being so stimulated. You know what I mean? Like I remember there was a point where I was reading about, I think it was in Behold the Pale Horse. I was reading about like the Sumerians for the first time, whom I had never heard of. You know what I mean? And I remember him talking about them sending like a bomb into outer space on a ship, and this bomb was going to explode, and it was going to give birth to a star called Lucifer in the year 2000. And I'm like, yo, like what kind of shit is this? Like, and I'm reading it in a book. So at that point in my life, you know, I'm looking at it like, well, this isn't a book, so there must be like a lot of truth in it. You know, I'm not saying, you know, like what was in his book was, you know, a lot of it wasn't true, because a lot of it was, but it just had a different impact on me because, you know, for me, that was me more vigorously getting into reading books on my own. You know what I mean? As opposed to, you know, just like every now and then, you know, just skimming through something. You know what I'm saying? So I got into that, but I still felt like there was like something missing from my studies. So I started to get into what you would call like Rosicrucian philosophy, you know, and Hermeticism, you know, all of this stuff, you know, as above, so below, the law of rhythm, you know, like all of these different principles that dealt with the, you know, the different like axioms of Hermes and Hermes Trismegistus and all of that material. So I got really into that. So, you know, essentially that was, you know, Western occultism, and I got into that. But when I got into like studying the Western occultism, I always knew that it was a Western perspective on African tradition. And because of, you know, like the background that I had through my parents, I was able to fuse the information and take you know, what was vital for myself and, you know, like leave the rest. You know, like I instinctively did that because in reading the literature, I would say, well, wait a minute, I remember Dr. Ben said this, you know, and this other scholar said that. You know, I didn't know too many Afrocentric scholars, but I knew of enough at that time where I can read the Western occultism and still extract what I needed that was relative to me and my cultural experience and leave the rest that I knew was kind of, you know, Western propaganda for people who are trying to create a new identity for themselves. And me being very clear about, you know, the people that I would call, you know, my ancestors, you know, like they were more so playing a central part in the cultivation and the development of these different esoteric ideas and concepts. You know, the law of rhythm, the law of gender, the law of polarity, as above, so below, like all of these different concepts. I, you know, started to immerse myself. Yeah, I was immersing myself in that. I remember my mom, you know, watching me like study these things. You know, one day she went to the library and she brought me back this book. And it was like real ill. I remember the cover was like, yo, what am I looking at? Like it was this diagram. And it was the Kabbalah. You know what I mean? So big ups to my mom. Like she actually put me on to the Kabbalah. I had never heard of it. I had no knowledge of it until, you know, she put this book in my hand and was like, hey, I think you might want to read this. You know what I mean?
She gave you a major liftoff in your spiritual development.
A major liftoff. Yeah. 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 She put that in my lap. And then from there, I, you know, was reading that book and, you know, I didn't, you know, too much gravitate to it heavy, but I did find it interesting. Mm-hmm. And then from there, like I got into, you know, like the Metu Neter, you know, by Rao Nefa. I literally lived right across the street from where he used to do his classes.
Okay, so before you go deep into that, because I was going to ask you about that, right? Because that's, to me, Metu Neter, Volume 1, that's like my Bible, you know? Right. I definitely appreciated his works. There's some things, you know, I was actually part of the organization for a little while. I left for personal reasons, but
word. Okay.
Yeah, I was part of it. I met with the Shechem, you know. We had conversations. Yeah, we had conversations. Yeah, all that. His wives, me and a couple of wives.
There was an older man. I see them. There was an older man with a ponytail. He had all white hair and a ponytail, and glasses.
Really?
I used to build with him in the store a lot because they had a little store, and then next door to the store they would give the classes.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know about Rao Nefa and Metu Neter and how deep that book is. But yeah, talk to me like about. So go ahead, go talk to me about your experiences with him because you lived right across the street. You used to build with him. I'm sure that helped because he's a genius as well.
Yeah, that was another aspect, you know, where I was, you know, getting familiar with the Tree of Life. As I continued my studies, I began to see things that were not consistent with what I was learning about in like traditional Kabbalah, such as, you know, the gender of the pillars, you know, the pillar of mercy and
severity. Yeah.
That was something that I noticed off the bat. And, you know, I started, you know, like, you know, taking classes there, reading his books. I was reading Israel Regardie, who I saw a lot of parallels between Israel Regardie's Tree of Life and the Metu Neter literature. And I just kept going and going, man. And I at a certain point, I would say maybe more so in the early 2000s, I started to incorporate more of the study. And I think Rao Nefa also kind of set the tone for this because in his book, like he would give you the different spheres of the Tree of Life, but he would give you an Indian correspondence and a West African correspondence, as I recall, and a Kemetic correspondence. Now, some people might have their perspectives on how accurate it was, and you know that's a whole different conversation.
That's a whole different thing.
But it gave me a reference point, and that reference point was very helpful in
that's what it did for me too.
Conceptualizing the different archetypes. You know what I mean? So I remember looking at all of that information, and that for me was a beginning of becoming more curious and more inquisitive about West African culture and spirituality. And what else was there? I remember.
Real quick for the audience, the book we're talking about is Metu Neter, Volume 1 by
Volume 1.
Nefer.
Yes.
And I want to highlight it because
Volume 1 in particular. I got Volume 2 as well, but
yeah, I got Volume 2 and Volume 4. I'm actually looking at them right now. But Volume 1 in particular, like you said, that's the one. That's the one with all the correspondence and everything. And I think also when I stepped into occultism as well, it helped me understand the voodoo and the Yoruba philosophy, and also the Hindu dealing with Indus Kush and everything because of his correspondence. So I think it's a great, even though it is a, I'd say it's a very articulate book. You know, you're going to go into your thesaurus if you're not well read, but it's a great foundation if you want to understand the synthesis of these deities and these gods and these different pantheons that we look at. Go ahead. Go ahead.
So that was very helpful for me. And then I actually remember the year. It was 2000. It was the spring, and I was watching, I don't know if you remember BCAT, Brooklyn Cable Access Television.
Yes.
Yeah, so on Sunday nights, there used to be a program called Our Story. And it was a program that was done by Minister Clemson Brown, who used to do video interviews with a lot of like Afrocentric scholars. And it was so critical and pivotal to like me just learning about more people that I probably wouldn't have learned about, because some of these people didn't have books in the bookstores, or at least if they did, a lot of those books were not readily accessible. So through his program, I learned about a lot of different people. And, one of the early people that I learned about was Professor James Smalls. And he did a talk, an interview, and he was talking about Ghanaian spirituality. You know what I mean? And I remember him showing the Gianyami and expressing, like what it meant and what it was about, and, what it everything that it represented. And I remember looking at it and was like, that looks like the Chinese system for the yin and the yang. You know what I mean? And, I just was like, okay, I'm going to start looking more into like West African spirituality, because he kind of like stimulated my imagination to look into that. And,
what's the Gianyami?
Gianyami is a Dinkra symbol.
Okay.
That has a particular meaning. So what it means essentially is that none but God exists. Everything exists within God. Okay. There's nothing outside of God. God is the totality of all. So I learned about that, and I started like looking into other scholars. Shortly after that, I remember I started studying like Malidoma Somé, and his information. I think dealing with the traditions of Burkina Faso, which is in West Africa, but it's like a little further up north, kind of like going more almost into Central Africa. I think it's just like underneath Niger. So I started like looking into that, and it was funny. I remember around that time, like I remember like I was hearing like Ghostface was in a lot of like, like issues like with the law, like around 99, 2000. And I remember coming across like some magazine, hip hop magazine or literature, where it was like, oh, he was in Benin. You know what I mean? And he was like, amongst like the Vodun priests, like he had spent like quite a bit of time over there. You know what I mean? And I was like, yo, like, a rapper, like a mainstream rapper, like in West Africa like that, and he's amongst these.
I read that same article. He caught malaria out there, which is what led him to.
He caught malaria out there.
Yeah.
Okay, I never got a chance to read that article. I only read articles that referred to it.
Yeah, he caught malaria out there, and he got really, really sick to the point where he thought he was going to die. So he was seeking, help out there, and that's how he ended up running into the priest and got into the mysticism. Shortly after that, that's when he drops. I think that's when he drops Queen.
That's I was going to go. I was going to go.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Around 99, I'm listening to Ghostface. Like this is when things was kind of like weird for Wu-Tang. Was like they were internationally known, but they wasn't getting a lot of radio play. I was and still am a huge Wu-Tang fan. So
definitely same here.
So I'm hearing about like all of these things, like he's, like getting into like I think he like served some jail time in Rikers, and I heard about like him in Benin, and then I'm like, and at this time, like I only have like a very vague understanding. Oh, there you got it, the Gin Yama.
Yeah.
That's it. So
That's
I only
it.
have like a very vague understanding and cultural reference for West Africa. Like at that time, I really wouldn't have been able to distinguish for you the deities of Benin and the Yoruba tradition with the Orishas. Like I wouldn't have been able to like make the distinctions for you, but I did know that Benin was in West Africa. And I remember he dropped Supreme Clientele after that. And I was like, yo, I'm a woo head, let me buy this album, even though the media was doing everything to make me feel like they weren't as relevant anymore. So I buy the Supreme Clientele and I'm listening to how he's spitting. And I'm like, what the fuck is this? But I'm listening to it and I'm like, I don't know what the fuck he's talking about, but I love it. And I didn't understand why I love it. So in my mind, I'm starting to connect what was he doing in Africa, West Africa, you know what I'm saying? And then I started like reading more about, just little books on, like West Africa here and there over the years. I remember reading I think Baba Raoul Canizares, I think it was called A Book on Palo, something like that. And I was, reading about, like the Congo tradition, just reading like, just different things, and that kind of set the tone for me just having just a broader perspective. And then, I started studying more about, the traditions, of Ghana a little bit more heavily. I remember a sister that I know, like she was like, you might want to check out the teachings of this other brother, and who was online. I think he was more so on Blog Talk, and his name is Chief Amachi, and he did a lot of talks on esotericism in Ghana, particularly the northern region. And I started like looking into like his information, and what I loved about it was very scientific. You know what I'm saying? And like that was another reference point for me in terms of being more familiar with West African spirituality. And this is the same brother who, interesting enough, he was in the Black Panther film. You know what I mean? And there were things that I saw in Black Panther that I know were based upon concepts that he was like really teaching people hands-on, because he was a spiritualist, you know what I mean? And he was responsible for like going back and forth to the continent. And I remember watching Black Panther and I was like, oh, he wasn't just, having a role in it in terms of like, just playing a role. Cause I think he was one of the tribesmen. What was the guy, the guys who was like barking when they had the showdown in the waterfall in the Black Panther movie?
Yeah, the gorilla tribe. I forgot. I know what you're talking about. I forgot the name.
Yeah. I can't remember the name right now. But anyway, he got like a really like a close-up view of him. You know what I mean? And he was in that movie. And a couple of years after that, maybe I think it was the year after, or maybe it was the same year. Later that year, I believe it was, he went to Benin. And he was going through rites of passage in the Mami Wata tradition. And, a lot of people online and social media was watching him, like post a lot of imagery and, like share a lot of concepts and ideas about the tradition. And I remember this was rough. Like I remember I'm literally 2 weeks away from going to Benin. And he comes back from Benin after everybody on social media is like seeing him go through all of these rites of passage, and he's posting these amazing pictures, and he comes back. And then like a week after he comes back, he transitions. You know what I mean? And it was like it caught like the metaphysical black spirituality, African spirituality community by storm. You know what I mean? Because it seemed like he was like rising into himself, into his power, and then right after that, this trip to Benin. So people was like, "Oh, he must have been cursed. Oh, it's dangerous out there." And I'm like, "Oh shit! Like I'm supposed to go out there in 2 weeks."
Oh shit!
You know what I mean? And people
Wow.
are sending me texts like, "Yo, Adika, yo, you still going out there?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm still going out there." And I'm not gonna lie, I was kind of like nervous because when I was going to Benin, like I was not, I didn't stay in no like hotel. I was amongst the people. You know what I mean? So, and I knew that going into like that was how I set things up.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know anybody over there, so I'm like, okay, this.
And you didn't know the language either.
I didn't know the language. I don't know French. I don't have any like Haitian people in my family.
What was it that gave you confirmation to do? I mean, was it like a heart's desire? Was it an urging? Was it a calling? Was it a voice that you heard? Because
I had a talk with somebody. I had a talk with another person who was familiar with West African spirituality, overall, but they had gone through rites of passage in different traditions, more notably Ghanaian tradition of the northern region, where you have a lot of people that they call like Malams, where they are Islamic, but they still practice, what we would call magic or sorcery, and they're dealing with roots and herbs and different things of that nature that allow you to have a very intimate relationship with the spirits of your environment.
Would you say they were Sufis? Because I know the mystic arm.
You can definitely couch them into. You can definitely couch them into the Sufic tradition. I know, like in Senegal, you have the marabouts, and you have the brothers out there. What do you call them? The name eludes me right now. It sounds like more, but what is it? You have brothers out there in Senegal who practice a form of Islam, the Murid. You have the Murid culture where they look like Rastas, but they're Sufis. Mm-hmm. So yeah, like a lot of that is connected. But I think that when you talk about the northern regions of Ghana, even some aspects of Senegal, like they're working with the jinn, which they have their own names for. And those who are familiar with esoteric Islam, you've probably heard stories about Iblis and the jinn, and how they are spirits that come from smokeless fire.
Yes.
Fire that doesn't emit a smoke. And interestingly enough, this fire, if you listen to various commentaries by Islamic mystics, they describe this fire as having the appearance of a rainbow, a luminous rainbow. And when I think about this luminous rainbow, it brings me to the imagery that you see in a lot of Lacoste fashion, like the like with the lizard and the bright, vibrant colors.
Benetton too, right? Like a Benetton Lacoste.
Benetton, Izod. Mm-hmm. When you go to Benin, you see a lot of this featured very prominently. And you also see a lot of imagery that speaks to Hinduism. But the people who are there are not worshiping Hindu deities. They're using those deities as place markers for what are oftentimes water spirits. And these water spirits are under the umbrella of what you would call, the Mami Wata tradition. And just to add, a little bit of clarity, Mami Wata is acknowledged throughout West Africa. And even when you go into Northwest Africa, in Morocco, you have an Aisha Kandisha, or Aisha the Sudanese, the Sudanese one, like they have their own tradition there as well. And you have Madame Sabot when you go more into like Central Africa. So this spirit is, and Niger is like a landlocked country. So you might say, well, where do you get these water spirits? You know, it's deep. But you have Mami Wata all over West Africa. But from what I've studied and what I've, read, somebody might have a different perspective, that it seems as if that tradition is particularly strong in Benin, and they have like a very strong emphasis on it over there. I mean, it's in Ghana too, it's in Nigeria, it's in Cameroon, but there's a emphasis of it there, and you can almost say that it's a pantheon of Vodun like onto itself. And within that, there's multiple deities. And a lot of times what they do is they use these images of like Hindu gods like Hanuman, Kalima, Shiva. They use these images as kind of like place markers for different water spirits that are within their own tradition.
So is Mami Wata part of Vodun, or is it its own separate society, so to speak, or spiritual tradition, or is it all integrated like hip hop takes parts of classical or rock or whatever and makes it its own, or is it its own unique thing like rock or hip hop or jazz? So
right. I would say, a lot of people over there would refer to it as a Vodun, but it's kind of like it has its own space. It's kind of like almost like where.
And for the listeners, I read your book. Your book, but for the listeners, I know what you said. What would you consider a Vodun?
A Vodun? I would say that it is a spirit. It's an intelligence. I would say that first and foremost. It's an intelligence. It's a itemized intelligence that has either Earth planetary origin, like it could be a spirit that comes literally from the actual Earth, this actual planet, or it can be an intelligence that is related to, just different far off star constellations, from different regions of the cosmos. And these spirits, these energies, they aid humankind in their own development and evolution on the individual's own personal level based upon what their own strengths and weaknesses are. So they're pretty much guides that assist humanity.
Are they ancestors? Are they ancestors, or are they some other worldly supernatural force?
Because there are so many of them, I would say that there are those among them who are elevated ancestors, and because of the powers that they demonstrated in life, that over time they were elevated to a particular level. I mean, you find this concept all over. What is that? You got that?
Oh, no. This is liquid chlorophyll.
Oh, liquid chlorophyll. I just had some of that last night. That's crazy. Different packaging though. Yeah. So man, some of them I would say are actually ancestors. And you find this in many different pantheons all over the world, where people end up revering a great king, a great priest, and they turn him into a deity. You know what I'm saying? Like in ancient Kemet, you have people who point to the mastermind Imhotep, and how in ancient Greek tradition, like that became Asclepius. And, that's all related to Hippocrates, and how doctors take the Hippocratic oath and all of that. So, and Imhotep is looked upon as pretty much like a god.
Yes.
You know what I mean? In a lot of different esoteric schools, particularly in Western esotericism. Mm-hmm. So that's just one example. And there's a lot of people who have I've seen literature that has strongly implied that the Orisha Shango was actually a great king who served during the within the Oyo Empire in West Africa. Amongst the Yoruba peoples. So it's not uncommon for you to find a situation where someone is a revered figure and they eventually become worshipped as, a great spirit, a deity or a demigod or whatever, what have you.
Yeah, you mentioned in the book that it's akin to, someone in the projects dying, of a woman that's well loved in the projects, and she dies, and then they spray paint a mural of her on the wall with wings on her back.
Exactly.
Making her a deity.
Right. You have that dynamic. Like, let's say you have somebody who was well loved in a project back in 1985. You know what I mean? And then that person transitions. Someone makes a beautiful, elaborate memorial of this person where they depict them through art in a way that makes them, they defy and they transcend humanity. They just look majestic. By the time you get to 1999, by the time you get to 2006, the people who are living in that area, they're still seeing that presentation of the person who died back in 1985. But because their social reference point for who's in the community has changed over time, they don't know who that person is. They only know that person now as the person on the mural. Whereas people who can remember further back, remember when they were a flesh and blood human being who they would see at the supermarket, who they would see sitting on a bench right in front of the projects, like maybe eating a bag of like peanuts, just like any other human being, Cheetos, whatever. You know what I mean? But people who are seeing that years later, it's just this,
it's just the image,
divine looking entity that's on a side of the building. So you take that concept and you apply it to multiple generations, how that can happen where a person who's an ancestor becomes looked upon now over time as like a full-fledged deity. So yeah, I would say that some of the Vodun correspond to that. And you could make the argument even that pretty much all of them reflect that in some type of way, shape, or form. It's just that their worship goes back so far, their reverence goes back so far that we're not able to tie that particular Vodun back to a particular ancestor in time. And then maybe you can, but you would have to go through the rite of passage to do that, and you find out, who that is. And, a lot of these spirits were meant to be family spirits. A lot of times now, because of the popularization of African spirituality, like people just say, oh, I like the way that deity looks, so I'm going to start worshiping them. Or I like the name, or I like the paraki or the story that's associated with them. So, yeah, I'm that deity now. I'm Oshun.
I'm Oshun.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I kill all the bitches, so I'm shining.
Oshun and Ogun are the most popularly traded names on the internet of deities. The women Oshun, the men Ogun. Everybody wants to be a thugged out warrior.
I got big titties and I got a big butt, so I'm Oshun.
Right, I'm pretty. I got a big butt. I'm Oshun. That's it.
I can't be Ogun.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, you can't be a Ogun and have big titties and a big butt. You know what I mean?
My face is too pretty.
Yeah.
But inside you want to kill something every day, and you want to lift weights and stuff
or
like that.
You're very strategic about how you present yourself, and you know what I mean? I mean, look at the whole BBL phenomenon.
Yes.
Right? A lot of that is based upon wanting to dominate a man's imagination. That's war. That's a warrior's mind.
Yes.
That's
deep.
a warrior's mind.
That's deep.
You know what I mean? That's not Oshunish. You know what I mean? That's a warrior's mind. You want to dominate a man's imagination for whatever reason. You might be doing it for commerce. You know what I mean? As like a social media personality. You may be into like your own, I don't know, pornography thing. There's a whole lot of different things. You might be an actress or a singer, and you want to just get that extra attention brought to you. You know what I mean? And one of the things that I talk about, as you know, is like how superficial we look at a lot of these deities. How we describe them and how we align ourselves with them. Like, oh, I have this equality, so I'm this. Oh, I'm Adika. I like to write, and I've been celebrated as a good writer, so I'm obviously Tahuti. You know what I mean? Like, and that might very well, be my energy, but it may not actually be that. You know what I mean? I might more vibrate with something else. You know what I mean? Or I'm a man, so I'm either Shango or Ogun, or you might be a man with a big barrel chest, big muscles, and you might find out through a thorough reading that your guardian is actually Oshun. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And it has nothing to do with no homosexuality or anything like that. We have to look at these intelligences as very powerful, dynamic beings with many different layers.
I had a reading with Brother Oba. I'm sure you're familiar with
Oba.
Brother Oba. Yeah,
Shout out to Oba, man.
Yeah, I had a reading in Jersey with Oba, and he, I had a couple of readings. The last one I did, we did some divination or whatever, and he was telling me about some psychic abilities and things like that. I won't go in depth, but he was also telling me that I'm a child of Oshun, and I remember when he told me that. I remember my masculinity, my male pride. I was like, nah, how could I be, a child of Oshun? You know what I'm saying? And then I pondered it, I pondered it. And then in the dream space, I saw the horn and the crown and the sun disk, and it kept just popping up in the dream space. Very, very, very lucid.
Yeah. That's what my reading was as well. I didn't go to Oba, but I went to another man who's very prominently known in that community, and I got the same reading. You know what I mean? But I remember even at that time when I got the reading that I didn't feel like a way about it. I was like, I get it. I know there's multiple layers to all of these entities.
See, you were more involved. I was like, what are you talking about? From Chief's little shoe.
I was like, wow, I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, when I got the dream and I went to more study, like get deeper into the study of Oshun and then Heru, I got it. I was like, okay, that makes sense. Compared to what he was telling me about the abilities and all the things I've already been through, it made perfect sense.
Right. Because a big part of like why a man would even feel a way about it is because a lot of time when these things are brought to us, through YouTube and social media, a lot of the people that are talking, a lot of them don't really know. They're just reading books and they're taking their superficial mentality about a thing, and then they're saying, oh, she's pretty and she's the goddess of love. She's not really the goddess of love.
No.
You know what I mean? It's more dealing with being able to beautify things, on a surface level and on a more, like just an innate level. You know what I mean? Like you might have a woman who's, as men, I think we all have a reference point for a woman who's not the best looker per se, but there's just something so beautiful and feminine about her that she's actually very attractive.
It overrides the
variety of ways,
physical beauty.
Yeah, exactly. So that could be a Oshun thing right there. You know what I mean? So yeah.
I want to get into the book a little bit.
All right.
We're already close to an hour in. I don't want to reveal the whole book because I want people to.
Indeed.
So I have like select passages that I'm gonna like ask you about, things that I highlighted. So the first thing I have, I love the way you intro your books with these stories. Let's start with that. We're gonna go chapter to chapter. What was this the way you wrote the intro story? Without revealing too much of it, it pretty much seemed like it was a flashback, so to speak. Like it reminds me of, I was recently watching The Sandman on Netflix, and it reminds me of sort of a dream recall, the way it was written, and the way it projects you into the future. Talk to me about your inspiration about the first paragraph. Let me bring up the name. The Lion's Pledge, where you have this vision of the lion speaking, the spirit lion speaking on your behalf. I think Yeah, I think it's very profound. Talk to me about your inspiration behind that, and where that came from. You did something similar
I
also
wouldn't
in your
say it's
first book.
on. I wouldn't say it's on my behalf, but it
Okay,
could be.
okay, okay.
It could be. Yeah,
I
it
take
could
that.
be.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, when I spoke with a lot of people, I've spoken with a lot of people over the years.
And real quick, before you start, why would you say it's not on your behalf? We'll go into that. Yeah,
Oh, go into that. Oh,
a
okay.
little bit.
Well,
Why you
I mean,
explain it?
yeah, I, it may not be on my behalf in the sense of me, Adika Butler, giving my own opinion on the happenings of when that line was speaking or when it was being spoken to. You know what I mean? Like that was more so me uh, being more so in the I guess you can say like the script writer's seat, and I'm piecing together a narrative. And really, I mean, truthfully, I'm everybody in
Facts.
that story. You know what I mean? So I'm looking for a way to uh, share information that I've been given that is of a sensitive nature because I've gone through rites of passage myself. I don't like to use the word initiated because it sounds very
Expensive.
well. My stuff wasn't cheap, but it sounds very grandi- grandiose. Like I don't want nobody to look at it like I'm saying like I'm this authority and you need to defer to me. Nah, it ain't that, man. I'm just a regular human being. I'm living my life and I'm learning just like everybody else. I've just gone through rites of passage. I feel like when you say I'm initiated, and there's nothing wrong fundamentally with using that term, but I just feel like the way that that word has been so muddied, it gives people an impression that you have like this great title bestowed upon you. It's kind of like saying king or chief or queen or empress or emperor. Like it ain't that. I've gone through rites of passage, and I've learned things that are pertaining to the nature of reality, particularly as it relates to my reality and myself. That I would not talk about. You know what I mean? Because I have certain contracts, we'll say.
Okay,
You know
gotcha.
what I mean?
Do you
And I
think?
would not
You
talk
think?
about, but it's critical to my development. And I would say that I've also had conversations with people about sensitive subject matter, and there's a way to convey things in a way where you're not breaking any taboos, but you're still able to share information where someone can, get the point. So to speak.
There's a lot of that sparks a question
And
because
movie script writers do this all the time. You go to a movie and you watch a movie and you see all of these esoteric concepts and you be like, yo, I wonder if that could be based upon something real.
yes,
You know what I mean? And then you go into the person's background and you find they're part of this secret society.
hmm
No, it's not by
disorder.
accident.
Yeah, it's not by
It's
accident.
not by
Yeah,
accident.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Symbolism is the key. I think symbolism is the key to spirituality. Is the key to understanding spirituality when you understand signs and symbols. But I want to ask you, since you brought up the rites of passage / initiation, there's schools of thought that say you don't have to go through the initiation. You're already initiated it as you are born here on the planet with access to spirit, so to speak. And there's a
Mhm.
school of thought that says you have to get initiated in order to gain access to higher forms of spiritual power or advanced forms of mysticism. What would you say to that?
I don't think a person has to do anything, but I think that if they're going to speak on a particular tradition, like me personally, I would not present myself to anybody as an authority on uh, Palo Mayombe or any of the Bukongo traditions if I have not gone through rites of passage in those traditions. I would not present myself as a person who's giving detailed information, and you're gonna pay, you know, X amount of dollars for my book to talk about that particular tradition. That's just me. You know what I mean? I don't see that. Now, can a person not be initiated and still give useful, helpful, general, basic information? Of course, I think you can, especially if you're just inherently gifted in being able to do that. And I suspect that there are people in our community who have not gone through formal rites of passage in these traditions, and they do a good job of giving people a general perspective and understanding and history on some of these things, you know, whether it
just
be
being well read, right?
Yeah, well read, or even, you know, well traveled. You know what I mean? I suspect you have that dynamic as well. But, you know, do you have to go to culinary school to be a great cook? No. But why wouldn't you go to culinary school if your goal is to be the best cook you can be, and undergo rites of passage in culinary school that allow you to cook on a better level? You know what I mean? I'm sure there are amazing cooks that have never gone to culinary school. My mom didn't go to culinary school, and she was known when she was alive as, you know, not alive, but when she was around in her flesh, as a great cook. So I liken it in the same way to like these different spiritual schools. You don't have to get initiated, but I think that it is to someone's benefit to, especially if they're approaching it from a traditional point of view. To me, from what I've observed, like Western occultism is like pretty much a grab bag. You know,
it's overwhelming. It could be overwhelming.
Yeah, it's a little bit of this, a little bit of that. You know what I mean? There's no real tracing something back to a particular lineage, where it's like, this goes back to this country, this goes back to that country. It's pretty much a grab bag. And a lot of it is based upon an external perspective on the internal traditions of a people. So if you're doing Western occultism, you know, no, like you can just not be, you don't have to be initiated. You can go based upon the merit of your own spirituality, and, you know, you just go about it on that level. But if you're talking about African traditions that are still living traditions, why wouldn't you want to learn from somebody who's gone through those traditions? And another thing that I want to say to people, because I notice like when people talk about initiation, they always go into like the orishas. There's mad African traditions, man. There's
out there. Yeah.
There's a lot of traditions that people haven't even written about yet. And there's more to it than Ifa and the orishas or Apollo. You know what I mean? There's a lot of things to learn. And truthfully, you wouldn't really be well versed in those traditions unless you did go through a rites of passage with somebody, because people have not written books yet in English for us to read in the diaspora to learn more about these things. You know, there's only a few traditions that people have written extensively on, but the African continent has way more to offer than just those traditions.
Yeah, I mean, even the word Kabbalah means to spread through by mouth, to spread what is hidden by mouth, ultimately. Yeah. So, yeah, it's really supposed to, you know, it goes back to the African griot, so to speak, where we spread our traditions mostly orally. We didn't really write things down, you know.
You have a tradition in Ghana called Tigare. I mean, I would love to see a book on it, and I'm sure there might be, but I don't know of any books in English that are specifically on the Tigare tradition. You know what I'm saying? So I think
you said before that you said, well, to me personally, but the book conveys this as well. But you said that there is no African spiritual tradition. Talk to us about that a little bit.
Oh man, okay. You want to take?
I get what you're saying, but
you want to take it there. You want to take it there. All right. So I was speaking when I was even speaking about traditional African religion. I'm speaking within a context so that people who haven't read my book can still follow along in our conversation. And I didn't want to exclude anybody who does not understand what I'm talking about. What does this person have on the screen? I would even consider that the birthing and life experience is an initiation once we reach a certain level of age. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I would say that a woman giving birth to a child is a powerful rite of passage, a spiritual rite of passage. Because I've talked to women. I'm going to get back to your question, but I just wanted to address what the person put up on the screen, that I've spoken to women who've talked about their experience giving birth to a child. And that is really some shit. Like one woman told me, like, yo, I saw God. You know what I mean? And I would not deny that they did. You know what I mean?
So I've been there for two of them, so I know.
Yeah, rites of passage constitutes a lot of different things. It's not just somebody leading you through something. But just getting back to that idea, I want to just like say that us raised in the Western world, you know, a lot of us, particularly as, you know, like men, you know, not having father figures, that wasn't my experience, but a lot of young men, a lot of black men have not had, you know, like father figures. So the idea of a father, an uncle, a big brother, you know, like teaching you something, it's looked upon as like, man, I ain't no little nigga, man. I ain't gonna be under no.
Yeah, you're not gonna son me. Yeah.
I'm not no sucker. I ain't gonna be under that nigga's wing, you know, like he's like I'm his son and he's teaching me. It ain't that. That's egotism.
Definitely.
People who have that mentality, they need an ego death. Because it ain't about that. Right. There are people who are further along than us in certain things, and it doesn't take away from you as a man to sit at the feet of this person and have them teach you things. And the whole notion that they're gonna belittle you and make you feel like shit, that's it's coming from movies, man. Like, I mean, that might be a dynamic depending on how far you go and what corner of the tradition that you're speaking about. But I've gone through rites of passage and nobody made me feel like I was, you know, like I was their bitch or nothing like that.
They didn't try
it depends on what you're learning, and it depends on what you're doing. And African spirituality is so vast. That's one of the things that I learned through my rite of passage. Like, I would never present myself as an authority on all of African spirituality because it's so vast. You know what I mean? And as far as it not being, there not being African traditional religion in the quote unquote way that we've been taught it, is because what is Africa? Is it the continent that white cartographers, map makers told us is Africa? Or what is Africa? Because if we really do the knowledge and we really, really get into the history as it is. Go back to
Pangea, right? Really?
Yeah, you can go back to that. But just to even take it at a more recent level, I mean, ancient Sumer was ours.
Mm-hmm.
That's our tradition. That's our civilization. Mm-hmm. But people would say, well, no, Iraq is in the Middle East. What the fuck is the Middle
East? Right? Yeah, that's just made up. What is the Middle East? There's nothing Eastern about. Even when I was a kid, I didn't understand that. I'm like, there's nothing Eastern about this place.
You read the historians going back to ancient Greece. They tell you that Ethiopia extended into what we would call the Middle East and India and all of that.
Indus Kush, yeah.
You have German scholars. I mean, people can go to my MindGo Media blog and look at the Q&A that I did with an author by the name of Hermel Hermstein and his book where he did a whole book on ancient Sumer. I laid it out all there. That article, and I'm not saying that because I wrote the article and did the interview. That article, that blog post is a fucking classic. And if you don't have any books on Sumer from a Black perspective, I very much encourage you to read that Q&A that I did on my thirdeyemax.net blog. Amazing. All of that is an extension of East Africa. Iraq is an extension of East Africa. Sumer was a part of our civilizations. Israel is in East Africa. So what am I saying now? The ancient Hebrews, what were they? They were East Africans. And then you can, if you want to take the story even further, a lot of those people were in West and Central Africa. When the Sahara started to dry up, they went east into Chad. They continued going east into the Nile Valley, and then they continued going east into what we would now call Iraq, and they built ancient Sumerian civilization. You know, all of those Anunnaki deities, all of that. There are correspondences between that and what you have in Central West Africa. The Hebrews were Africans, man. The ancient Hebrews of the Bible were Africans.
The ancient Hebrews were definitely Africans, yeah.
Look at the names.
Yeah, they're definitely.
Let's look at the names.
Even if you look at the deities.
Obadiah, Methuselah.
Yeah.
Shout out to Chief Yuya, who I've heard speak on this subject matter. You know, he's talked about this as well. You know, and I've been, you know, researching this as well. You know,
I mean, you could even look at the Jews, the Orthodox Jews, the way they dress with the locks and everything, and them wearing black, and like, come on, they obviously took our tradition. It's super obvious. By
The oldest script that anybody can refer to that you can call a Hebrew script, because even there, the oldest script that you would call Hebrew was extracted from what we would call the Phoenicians. You know, that's what the Greeks call them.
Right.
But the Phoenicians, when you're talking about the Phoenicians, you're talking about the Levant, the Horn of East Africa. It's all African, man. And then when we know that Ethiopia is extended into India, and then you got Hinduism, which is an Indo-European take on the tantric traditions of the people, the black people who are in India. What the fuck is a traditional African religion when you know that what is actually Africa extends into all of these different areas? Hinduism, Kali, Shiva.
Even Jesus was hiding in Egypt, and the three kings came to visit him in Egypt. He was born in Egypt.
There you go. Heru.
All religions are based on ancestor worship. So all religions are African.
All of it comes from people who look like me and you.
Exactly. Yeah, there's no spiritual tradition.
The oldest Hebrew script is in Africa. It's in, if I'm not mistaken, it's in Ethiopia.
Would it be the Coptic?
Let me just say this. There's no Hebrew script that you can point to and show somebody this is a script that was written down by some ancient Hebrew thousands of years ago. There's nothing that is older than what you would find in somewhere in East Africa. I believe it's Ethiopia. I might have to brush up on my studies a little bit, but whether it's in Ethiopia or what, it's East African. It's African. It's black people shit. So whether you're dealing with the Torah, the Quran, and interestingly enough, when I was talking to people from Benin who practice Vodun, Islam came up a few times, but I'm not going to get into that. You know what I mean? In terms of the relationship between Islam and what we would call the Ifa tradition. There was a reference to the Otoro Meji, which I think deals with the divination system. And I'm not qualified to get into that yet, so I'll leave that for a later time, or somebody else will pick up on that. But I was told that all of these traditions, you know, are our traditions. You know what I mean? It's just that different people took it on as their own. They controlled the institutions, and now they're dictating to the world like the shit is theirs.
Right.
It's kind of like how we cultivated hip hop, but we didn't necessarily develop and create all of these different record labels and radio stations and media outlets that are determining what's hip hop and what's not. Other people are doing that who have not looked like you and I. But that doesn't change the fact that the people who created the actual living culture and traditions look like you and I.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know what I'm
And
saying?
that even goes
It doesn't change
to,
that.
That goes to music too. You know,
Yeah.
like you were saying.
So all of it is ours,
music.
and we need to recognize that.
Mm-hmm.
The Torah, the Quran, the Bible, when you get into the origins of what people call Gnosticism, when you get into like the core aspects of what we would call Gnosticism, it's really Coptic.
Yeah.
Comes out of East Africa.
Mm-hmm.
Then the Greeks started messing around with the theology, and they fused it with their Platonic thought, and then they hijacked it and they created this idea of the world is evil and it's
the prison planet. Yeah,
it's a prison
and the archons
planet.
are gonna get you. They eating off of you.
Yeah. And if you really get into Gnosticism, which has its roots in Coptic psychology coming out of East Africa, they didn't say that the demiurge created the world. They said that the demiurge, in his delusion, in his fucked up mindset, thought that he created the earth. It didn't say that he created the earth. And in all of our traditions, we look at the earth as being an expression of the divine. Why the fuck do people think that the Neteru, from which we get the word nature, a lot of them are depicted with the heads of animals.
Yeah.
It's not because there was people walking around in that time with the head of a dog and with the head of a bird. That was their way of conveying the fact that there are intelligences within nature that are divine. So nature is divine. And because nature is the outplaying of what we would call the physical earth, there are many different spirits that are within this planet. Our planet is divine. And whether you're dealing with West Africa,
right? This is Maya. It's its own entity.
Yeah. Whether you're dealing with West Africa, whether you're dealing with Kemet, they did not ever say that this earth is a prison and a hell. They said that it was someplace to transcend. We're not supposed to just look to stay here and become super duper seniors. There's many different experiences waiting for us in far off places that we have no reference point. Well, I wouldn't say we, because yeah. There's places that I have seen that are crazy, and there's much more that I don't even remember. You know what I mean? That places that I've been to and places that I haven't gone to in the cosmos. You know what I mean? In terms of, just experience, man. So even in African dance, if you know African dance, all of it is based upon the spirituality, the emulation of nature, like understanding the fluidity of the river, understanding the terseness of fire and the aggressiveness of it. We incorporate that into our movement, into our dance. Like, I can't even like go into that enough. Like, there's no ancient Black people that was saying the earth is a prison. It just doesn't exist. The only place where you find that is Europeans who are trying to give their perspective on our ideas, but because of cultural invariance, which is their inability to truly internalize our ideas as they are, they always have to put a lot of their own selves in it. So they add a lot of their Greek concepts, where they're dealing with a lot of cave trauma from being in the Ice Age. Can you imagine, like you talk about, think about being in the projects where you got, like people talk about Project Heat, how you got like that extra heat that's in the projects. And then you have like in another context, like you're in this apartment and it's the dead of winter and the heaters is not going at all. You know what I mean? Imagine being in the Ice Age and you were in a cold fucking cave. Like, can you imagine the resentment that you have to nature? You can't go and pick an apple off the tree You can't pull something out of the ground and eat it. You can't go by the lake and by the river, by the sea and go fishing and get something to eat for yourself. You got to kill a motherfucker to eat. Think about how aggressive that makes you. Think about how resentful that makes you to the land. Like, I went to culinary school, so I know the differences between the different cuisines in Europe. Southern European cuisine is different from the cuisine in Germany. They don't really be messing with chicken like that. They don't be messing with no fish like that. They dealing with veal, horse. You know what I mean? They eat stuff like that. So you can see even in the cuisines today, when you study the different parts of European cuisine, it is diverse, especially when you get into Southern Europe with the Southern Italians, the Sicilians, people from Naples, those regions. They eat a lot of fish because they're by the sea, and their temperament is different. They like to wear, like, I ain't gonna get into all of that because I'm like going all over the place.
No, we follow you. We follow you.
Yeah, yeah. I want to like still keep it focused, but
I got a question from the audience. But
I'm just saying. All I'm saying is that the Ice Age made people who lived in that part of the world, it traumatized them so much, where when they started to cultivate their philosophies, they kept that in their philosophy. So the whole idea that the earth is a prison and that it's horrible and that it's a horror movie, that comes from that experience.
The European has trauma bonded with their soul. So therefore, most who still have that mindset and that DNA resonance, they do not have access to the spirit. This is my theory and my idea. I believe everyone has a soul because we all were born, right? So that soul is your foundation of water. But everyone doesn't have access to spirit. Everyone doesn't have access to the depth and the breadth of spirit that allows you to have advanced perception, right? Touch on this question right here. They want you to touch on this, and then I'm going to ask you a question about the book. Okay, touch on the spiritual process, which is in the book actually. The spiritual process of writing, and writing being an art form. In the book, you actually say, which I think is funny because I was going to ask you a question literally on the next page of the book. In Rainbow Serpent Gravity, you say writing is a form of meditation that evokes spirits from the depths of the soul. I am a conjure man. Talk to us about the spiritual process of writing, and as the Queen said, writing being an art form.
Yeah, just like I said, writing is meditating with a pen in your hand or a keyboard in your hand, whatever your tool of writing is. It is a very, depending on how much you give yourself to that experience, determines like how far you can really go with it. As is the case with anything, you know what I mean? Basketball, culinary arts, whatever it is, the extent to which you give yourself to that thing is how you experience it. So a person who plays professional basketball for an NBA team has a different experience with basketball than a person who just plays it on the weekend for pickup, just to stay in shape. I would say that it definitely is, for me, a very spiritual thing. It very much is an art form because my writing is not dry and academic. It's very
poetic.
But it is academic. It is academic.
But it's very your way you write is very poetic. Very
poetic.
Bhagavad Gita.
Yeah.
Gita-ish, I would say.
Thank you. That's interesting because my great grandmother is from India. So that makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of ancestral reverence just in the cover of my new book. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's a lot going on there. But when I'm writing, I might be writing something and something in my head tells me, Adika, stop. Go look this up. And I'm thinking in my head, that don't got nothing to do with what I'm writing about. That don't got nothing to do with what I'm writing about. And it's like, go look this up. Like, that was my early experience when I was in like my mid to late 20s. Now, where I'm at now is like I don't even question it. It says it's like a navigator. It's like I'm driving, turn left, turn right. That's how I am now when I'm
Spiritual
writing.
GPS.
My spiritual GPS. It's like something in my head.
GPS was invented by a black woman, so it makes sense.
Oh, word. Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah, GPS was invented by a sister.
Yeah, so it's like a GPS system where turn right, turn left. Like I'll be writing something and it's like, go look this up. Then I go look it up. And then I click on something and then I'll go and I'm like, oh shit. And then a lot of times what people ask me, they'd be like, yo, Adika, in your books, you're able to weave the history and cultures of things that look like they're far apart, and you bring them together in such a seamless way, and you really not even reaching. Like it's very much legitimate what you're saying, but it's so far away from how you would normally conceptualize it. It's because of that. I'm getting these different downloads. I'm getting these different spirits that are saying, look into this, look into that. Did you consider this? Did you consider that? You can connect it to this. You can connect it to that. And that's how I write. So yeah, it really is an art form in the sense that there's color involved. Sometimes I'll write something and I'll rhyme by accident. You know what I mean? Writing is an art form. Don't get me wrong about that, especially if you have a very right brain approach to it, which I do.
Definitely.
I would say that my writing is a beautiful synthesis between the left and right hemispheres of the brain.
I would
agree. You can see the left brain in my writing, the academic, and you can see the imaginative, creative, avant-garde Picasso style in it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. There's you could definitely tell you're well researched. You could definitely tell that you are a hip hop historian into the music, and you could also definitely tell that you synthesize your concepts very well. Meaning that,
thank you.
When I read it, I could see how things link together. And it was seamless. It was like when I read it, I was like, yeah, that makes sense. I didn't have to really like to do like deep digging or deep reason or rationalizing. It was just like as soon as I read it, certain things, I was like, yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Here's what I want to get into. There you say in Rainbow Serpent Gravity. Now I want to talk about two things. So first thing, I'm going to talk about something in the book. Second thing, I'm going to talk about coronal mass ejections that has been happening lately. And the Aurora Borealis. I don't know if you looked at this or seen it, but the Aurora Borealis, or the Northern Lights, have been drifting further down into America. Yeah, even here in New York, there's people that see them in Albany and things like that. But they've been like rainbow colored, in the spirit of this rainbow serpent gravity, right? Myself, the last week, personally speaking, I have been on an intermittent fast that has not been of my choosing. Meaning that I've been going outside noon, pretty much. I work from home, so I go outside at noon. I've been going outside at noon pretty religiously, and the way the sun feels when it hits my chocolate skin is different than the way it feels at 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. or even 9 a.m. When I hit that noon sun these last couple of days, it's like therapy. It's like food. I could, and it's hard to really articulate in words, but
I know what you're talking about.
It's food for real. And
yeah.
And I've been also practicing semen retention. Shout out to your book for that, because you gave me a working concept to where I see people on YouTube and they're just talking about it. So I guess that's.
I didn't even know that was a movement on YouTube. A brother put me onto that.
Yeah, it's a big thing.
There's a whole movement.
No fat, they call it. Yeah,
no fat. That's what he said. Yeah, that's
fat.
what he called it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. A lot of people don't explain it correctly, Yeah. And I feel like the way you broke it down, where semen retention deals with metabolism, that metabolism allows you to basically convert energy. It reminds me of like nuclear fusion, so to speak, to where you're converting that energy into
Right.
power, nuclear
Right.
fission, not fission, I should say.
Yeah, that nuclear fusion that you talk about is actually what I don't want to say gave birth to, but when you study books on physics and it talks about astronomy and it gets into like how our sun came into being, that what got it into that space that it's in now, that nuclear fusion, it's pretty much the same thing principally, that brought it into being on a cosmic level.
Yeah, I think semen retention, especially during this time with these coronal mass ejections for men, especially, I think it's key, because I could definitely notice the difference, and just the and like I said, I feel like the sun is feeding me. It's
Keeps
giving it's giving me
the daddy
food.
belly away from you too.
Yeah, because I'm not hungry during the day. I go out and I don't get hungry till like 6, 7 o'clock. Like I
Yeah,
haven't eaten anything
yeah,
yet all day, and I probably
yeah.
won't again. I've been like my body's conditioning now to not eat until like 6 or 7 o'clock, which
Listen,
is crazy.
it's funny. Like I feel like this might have happened just so I could like share this just now, like right now, without like no cap at all. You know what I mean? Yesterday, I was out and about. I was with my little boy and daughter, and we was in the park, and I was like teaching him. He's like 2 years old. He's almost three actually, and I was exposing him to baseball for the first time.
Oh wow.
So we're in the hot sun, and we're playing baseball. After that, I took my kids like out, and like they got a little like time to like just play around and do their recreational thing. And I was literally walking around like playing with them, uh, doing work in the house, cleaning, just doing a lot of things yesterday. It was a very busy day yesterday, and my wife, who will probably see this video, uh, she knows that what I'm saying is absolutely true. I did not eat at all yesterday. I got up in the morning. I was in the sun a lot. I did not eat anything, and I kid you not. I did not put anything into my mouth until 11:51.
Mm, that's how it
Last
is.
night,
It's like
midnight.
food. It's like when the sun
Now,
sets,
it's
that's
not
when I start
healthy.
to get
Yeah,
hungry.
it's not healthy to like eat that late, but
No, it's
that's when
not.
I just happened to eat yesterday, and I didn't eat anything. And I was going. I was vigorous. I wasn't sitting around. I was doing what I
Same
need to
here.
do. I was doing shopping. I
And
was
when I tell
with
you,
the
Adika,
kids.
the downloads, I'm looking at things. This is what I'm gonna say, whether people believe it or not. My
Mhm.
Nile Valley ancestors have been communicating with me heavy. I'm looking at symbolism of things that I've looked at for years. And my level of understanding
Uh-huh.
and my level of retaining the memory of the concepts,
Yeah.
phenomenal. Fucking phenomenal. You know what I'm saying? Phenomenal. And I'm a
Mhm.
man of a certain age. Like the clarity that I have right now, this present moment, based on these last couple of weeks, and based on how, like I said, I didn't choose to fast. It wasn't my choice. You know what I'm saying? It just happened. I didn't want to eat over the last week or so, and yeah, I think, and then with your book coming around, the time to precede that, it was like everything kind of synced up. With these rainbow auroras that are now hitting us, you is the rainbow serpent gravity. I think our frequency is all of our frequencies are being raised, but I also think that there is a shift. For instance, there is a shift, and we are all like those of us that are sincere seekers are shifting into the point to where we're those that are sincere are really getting what they are looking for. If that makes sense. And I'm seeing that in a lot of some of the people that I follow on YouTube that I believe, or my energy tells me that they're sincere, that they're going through this particular shift as well.
Mhm.
With this rainbow serpent gravity, you said when we cry or laugh, we tend to think that we are always the source of the emotions that we experience in those moments. But this is not the case. We are often experiencing the influence of powerful spirits who tug and pull at our hearts and minds. These intelligences hold tremendous influence over people, places, and things. Talk to me about these intelligences that maybe influences us to laugh or cry. Are these the voodoo? Are these the ancestors? Are these some other spirits?
In terms of like the either or aspect of the question, I would more so look at it, even like going back to what we were talking about earlier in terms of, are the voodoo ancestors, or are they just these beings that are in the cosmos that are extension of the universal Godhead? I would look at it more of like a Venn diagram, like the Vesica Pisces diagram with the two overlapping circles, and then within the center where they both meet is a whole different thing. I would say like it's more, like that. I would say that it's ancestors, it's deities, and sometimes those deities are ancestors. So it's all of those things. You know what I mean? And it depends on how you're being reached. I had an experience in Benin where I had a very intense experience. And one of the ways you can tell what's going on is that it's a feeling that just suddenly comes over you. There's no buildup. It just comes.
Inspiration, basically.
It's momentary, yeah. Mm-hmm. It's inspiration. It could be anything. It could be you just crying. Mm-hmm. Like what just come to my mind is basketball fans from the 90s would remember this clip. Like I think Muggsy Bogues throws the alley-oop up, and then Larry Johnson, Grandmama catches it, and he slam dunks it, and he goes, ah! He's just screaming, you know what I mean? That's even little things like that. That's what makes you do that?
What makes you do that?
I don't think, he planned to do that. I think, we just respond to the moment. So I liken something like that, people would have a reference point for as a small example of what I'm talking about. You know what I mean? Like
that's the rainbow serpent gravity, right?
The rainbow. Me naming it that, I was coming up with like titles for all the different chapters that was related to what I was talking about, but was not related to what I was talking about. So, rainbow gravity is a theory in the world of modern cosmology, which is extension or another aspect of physics where people attempt to explain how the universe came into being. So it is an alternative to the idea that people refer to as the Big Bang. So there's an idea afoot amongst many cosmologists, scientists, where you started out with this light and it started to descend in its vibration. And these different vibrations, you can say it corresponds to different tones, or you can even say musical notes, and different colors. And these different colors and tones are different dimensions of time and space. And these different dimensions of time and space coalesce and collapse upon each other to give rise to the reality that you and I are participating right now. Mm. So everything is different densities of light based upon our, not our ability, but based upon the, whatever you want to call it, the Most High, the all in all, its ability to slow down the spin of these cycles of light. That determines how solid and condensed these expressions of light become. I kind of liken it, and I did this comparison in my book, The Treasures of Darkness. It's kind of the difference between, like, when you're looking at a bicycle wheel and the wheel is spinning, and you're looking at the spokes where you can individually make them out, to when the spokes just become a blur. When it's a blur, that's light in its higher frequency phase. When it slows down and you can see the individual spokes on the bicycle wheel, then that's matter in its more tangible phase. So rainbow gravity refers to that element of creation, and me referring to rainbow serpent gravity was just me introducing an idea where people can potentially make their own correlation between that serpent archetype in the Vodun tradition and kind of like relay that to what they would see in the world of physics.
These are excellent. Talk to me. Let's go into one of my favorite chapters, Legba at the Crossroads. You know, because I had an interesting dream when I talked about a couple video goes of Legba or Papa Legba coming to me. This chapter it put that dream. It was like the missing piece of that dream.
One more thing. I want to get back to. You were mentioning about these the aurora borealis and all of that, the colors.
Yes.
I just want to say something that, you know, you also got to look at the fact that just as we have our own cultures where we're dealing with certain knowledge of esotericism as it relates to spirituality and interfacing with different beings, there are other groups of people, other communities that have very similar knowledge, but they have a different attitude about life than you and I may have. And you have to also keep in mind that they may take on certain iconography within their own culture and use certain imagery that they use to represent themselves because they know what is coming and they want to make sure that they are on the cusp of whatever that energy is and whatever benefits that energy can bring to them and those who think the way that they think. So they'll get ahead of all of that by co-opting the imagery and programming you to have an aversion to that imagery. And that's all I'm going to say. And I'll leave other people to leave it to their own imagination and their own adept skills of observation to determine, you know, what examples they can look at in popular culture and world culture and see where they may even be able to highlight that for themselves.
Okay. So you kind of killed this whole leg about the cross. You killed it. I was going to go with it with the answer. But but yeah, talk to me about. You talk at, you know, in the book about Legbod and Teddy Pendergrass, but also, you know, well, I think we talked about it earlier with the Oshun thing, and you might be a man, but you still, you know, chose about Oshun or whatever. But what would talk to me about? Where was I at? Should people throw out their Baphomet statues, being that we have a Legba already?
I think
is Baphomet necessary?
You know what I think, and I'm glad that you asked me this. This is a great question. It's one of the best questions that I've been asked in an interview because I really wanted to address this. I wouldn't necessarily say people should throw it out. I would say don't look at it as the be all and end all to the principle that they are getting a better understanding of and that they're looking to work with. Ideally, I would say study it all and create your own imagery. Draw your own archetype that speaks to what that might be. You know what I mean? But I think that if you're looking at that principle and that archetype, I don't think you have to be necessarily married to the Baphomet image that is, you know, so prominent in Western occultism, because the truth of the matter, as I lay out so simply in my book, is that our own culture has all of the elements already. So we don't need to go outside of that if we're trying to get. If you're gonna go with something that is not yours, why not go with the imagery that reflects people that more likely come out of your own bloodline?
Right.
At least I know with the Legba statue that there are people within my bloodline who move through those societies, that culture. You know what I mean? Who may have even had a say in cultivating the psychology and the different theological beliefs. Now, yeah, people might say, well, yeah, you can say the same thing with Baphomet. But as I, laid out the history of that uh, in my book, people will see the history of Baphomet, and yeah, you can link it back to, us and the Moorish presence, and
I mean,
Europe.
even Kemet has their own deity, which I exposed on this channel called Ben Bajet,
Yeah,
which sounds just like Baphomet. He's
yeah,
literally holding a staff just like Baphomet. He's
yeah,
literally androgynous just like Baphomet,
yeah,
So it ties that to, a legba or a papa legba, as the Haitians say,
yeah,
and it made a lot of sense to me because, I have this thing Adika, where I was wrestling, and it's gonna sound silly, but I feel like I can share this with you as
yeah.
man to man, where I was wrestling. I like watching people get roasted. Like I like roasting back and forth, right? It's something that I see as fun. And I was asking myself, I said, self, why am I attracted to this? I'm a man of spirit, this and that, why I believe in treating people the way I want to be treated. Why do I like seeing people get roasted? And then it brought me back to a memory when I was a child watching WWF and Bob Backlund, and the joy of being a child watching this. And this just came, I've been thinking about this for months, like why, and I didn't get it, and recently it came to me. And the balance of us being positive, so-called high vibrational beings, right, and low vibrational is something that I believe we have to meet in the middle. Like, you can't be too high, and I believe you can't be too low. You have to
Mhm,
stay in the middle, which, according to frequency, just
mhm.
basic frequencies,
Right,
beta, alpha, theta. The alpha frequency is that middle line,
right.
where you're in between, the highest of high vibration and the lowest of low. I mean, you can't be so high vibrational where you're zen all day, and all you think about is the Illuminati and what somebody is going to do. And you
Yin and
can't
yang.
be so low that you're acting like an animal and a beast all day and just a straight savage. There has to be some type of convergence. And I think a lot of times we that are on this path, and at least I can speak for myself, that we beat ourselves up, and it also goes back to the principle where you talk about homosexuality in the book and how we may be looking at homosexuality here in the East wrong. Talk to me a little bit about that and how that relates to the understanding of balance between polarity, so-called positive and negative polarity, or higher and lower vibrations of polarity.
Right, right. I mean, it kind of like is related to like what we were talking about earlier about, the whole Oshun thing. You know what I mean? Like, because Western culture, because of, the Western culture that, we have, like come up in, a lot of us. And, I think we're all subject to it, some more so than others, is that we tend to look at things on only a face value level, where we're only looking at the superficial aspect of things. You know what I mean? So somebody might look at it like, okay, well, um, I'm dealing with this feminine aspect of divinity. I'm working with this feminine divinity in my spiritual work. So because I'm working with this feminine divinity and I'm a man, then that means that I'm engaging in some like shit that's like not appropriate. Like, you're
Right.
trying to find your inner woman. Like,
Right.
it's not about that. It's
Right.
about like femininity and masculinity. Like, there's certain expressions in nature that are masculine, and there's certain expressions in nature that are feminine, and that deals with different forms of movement, different powers, different psychic, abilities, different mental abilities, different forms of cognition. You know what I mean? And by exploring these different areas, then we have a chance to understand ourselves in a very full nature. Like you can look at somebody, like for example, I might make some people upset, but somebody, let's say like a hip hop artist.
We're here for make a man.
Like let's say like a hip hop artist, like say even like a Tupac archetype, which is very like hyper like emotional and very passionate. Like there might be something there where there's a strong feminine energy that maybe it may not have been accepted. It may have been brushed off because it's frowned upon, and because that energy is frowned upon, you're hyper extending and hyper exuding what appears to be like this hyper masculinity, but it's like it's too much, you know what I mean? And it comes from this place of wanting to or not knowing how to fuse something that has a little bit more yin, you know what I mean? Like you might have where your true nature is more yin, and when I say yin, like you're more soft-spoken. But if you came up in an era where we got to be tough and we got to be, like have that whole mentality, then you're going to go extra hard in conveying that you're this tough guy when you might have been in your true exalted state and being more yin oriented and knowing that that does not take away from you as a man. That does not make you, that doesn't mean that you like to swallow sausages and have yogurt on your back and shit like that. It just means that, you're able to identify with an aspect of reality that is moving through you and you being comfortable with that and learning more about yourself. Mm-hmm. So I remember I used to go and I used to play basketball at this park. And there was this guy, he was like considerably older than me. You know what I mean? And sometimes, like he would get in on the games. We would play Utah, which is pretty much a basketball game where it's like it's every man for himself. And the first person who gets to 100 and hits a 3-point shot after they get to 100, they win the game. So I remember like him playing and, he was from my block, you know what I mean? And we was playing and like, I remember like I used to like, people used to always say they used to like my form when I went into my jump shot. Like I used to like really rise. This was before I was in college and I was garbage. But back when I was like in like my high school age, like I had a really good jump shot. And I remember I rose like, and I kind of like stayed in the air and I went into my form and he just like got it out of there. And everybody was like, oh, like he smashed your shit. You know what I mean? And he was like hyper masculine, you know what I mean? And he had like all of the girls used to like him and all of that. And I remember talking to my sister about this, like, yo, did you see so-and-so? And she was like, yeah, I saw him. Like he was straight flamed out. Like years later, I saw him like 20 years after that. And he was
into a RuPaul.
Yeah, he was like, it was clear. I didn't even hear him speak. It was just, I saw him and he was walking, it was clear. I mean, you could see it.
Yeah. I got a
was
homeboy.
He like that back? No, the question though is, was he like that back then and felt that he had to tuck something down in because he wouldn't be accepted?
Or hide behind hypermasculinity. Yeah.
Or was it that he wasn't like that back then, but because life called upon him to incorporate something within himself that spoke to blending and learning about the feminine aspects of being, and because he totally rejected that, something happened over time, and then something happened. He met, I don't know what happened, but you know what I mean. Like these things happen, but I'll just leave it pretty much right there. I get more in detail in the book, and I'm more clear about, you know, the whole dynamic in that chapter of the book. But I hope that that introduces a different conversation that is different and, you know, just more mature, and gets us to explore things and look at things in a way that, you know, a lot of us as, you know, quote unquote conscious people, you know, we haven't explored. I think, you know, one of the things that I like about the book is that it's not cookie cutter conscious community
No.
conversation. You know what I mean? Like, this is something that stands on its own. You know what I mean? To
And it's
my
definitely going to
knowledge,
stay on this test of
nobody,
time, too.
yeah, see? Yeah, man. There's nobody that I know of who's gone to, I mean, think about how many times we've heard people lecture and talk about voodoo. You know what I
Bro,
mean?
I read a
Oh,
lot. I
dude,
read a lot. And I've
Haitian voodoo.
never read anything like
But
this. And I say
nobody
that
has gone
humbly,
to Benin. Nobody that I know of has gone to Benin within our community
that I know of
to
either.
talk to
No.
people who practice it. You know what I mean? And get a perspective, you know, who also did research on it. So I was on my Zora Neale Hurston shit. And I think what I brought to the community is very powerful. And I think it'll be very helpful to people who look to study. Because usually when people talk about voodoo, it's from a Haitian standpoint, or they might get into the Louisiana aspect. But I went straight Benin, where all of that, you know, comes from. You know, and they do practice it in Ghana and Togo as well. But I went straight to the source of a lot of it. And yeah, man, it's a great journey, and it was a great experience, and I loved it. You know what I mean? And I hope people really, don't sleep on me, man.
Nah, don't sleep on this
I
book.
want to tell people, like, don't sleep. Like,
Don't
think
sleep.
that
Yeah.
because you don't see my name everywhere, like,
Nah, this is
this shit
that
fire,
one.
man. Like,
This is that one. This is
yeah,
that
it's
one.
that book.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I wanna talk about two more things, and I'm
I'm
gonna
gonna
let
have
you
to get
go.
going. Like, I'm gonna have to get going, you know, pretty soon. But
Yeah,
yeah, I
yeah.
got
I just
to.
want to cover these two things, and then
Yeah,
we out.
indeed,
Yeah,
indeed.
yeah. So I want to talk about this waves of Atlantis, right? I think this is
Mhm.
important.
Yeah,
We talk about ghost DNA, which is pretty, a lot of people know about the ghost DNA, and that,
right,
there's ghost DNA in West Africans that,
right,
no other culture,
right,
Europeans, Asians, et cetera, don't have that DNA.
right.
Some people say it's Anunnaki DNA,
Yeah, I've
whatever.
heard people say that.
Yeah, some people say that. But you say this, and this is the part I want to talk about. You say that, interestingly enough, these alien rock formations, as far as we know, are between West Africa and the Pacific Ocean. You say West Africa could very well be the location for Plato's Atlantis, while the Pacific Ocean has been believed to be the location of Mu, another advanced legendary civilization that New Agers say existed concurrent with Atlantis in the ancient past. When I read this and I read your backing material to prove this, I was like, whoa, like West Africa,
Yeah, yeah.
Atlantis, and how you
Because
tie everything
people,
in.
people, people,
It's
people,
crazy.
people listening to this is gonna be like, wait a minute, dude, you talking
Right.
about Benin, the homie, and the dude is reading something about it. Like, this is some mishmash garbage, new age.
Yeah,
You're trying to.
you got to read it.
That's why I said don't sleep on me and my ability to triangulate and make different connections, man. Because if you're thinking that my ability to do what I do is limited to what you've already seen, then you're gonna miss out on a lot. I am a unicorn. You know what I mean? Like, I'm different, you know. And when you read the book, you're gonna see, like, nothing that I said as it relates to that, believe it or not, is far-fetched. And I have enough knowledge about world history where I can make these connections. I have enough knowledge on world mythology where I can make certain connections, and it's a seamless connection. It's an academically responsible connection. It's a reasonable, plausible connection. Nobody from a university is going to read what I said on that subject matter and say, this nigga's a quack. They're going to be like, oh, shit, okay. Well, this is different, but maybe this is something to look into. You know what I mean? Like, that's going to be the response. So, yeah, man.
You have in the book a spiritual verification system, where you look at art Talk to me a little bit about your verification system as far as art and how that plays out with so-called spiritualists or people that people may look to, and how that verification
If
system.
you don't have if you don't have any artistic inclinations, and it doesn't mean to say that you're not a master, but if you don't have any artistic inclinations, I don't give a fuck what you want to say. I don't give a fuck what you have to say about esotericism or occultism or the spiritual sciences or whatever you want to call it. Your imagination, your creativity is your calling card, is what qualifies you, is what gives you your credibility. And if you look at all of the people who are at the forefront of what we call, the Black consciousness movement right now, they all have like some creative ability that is clear. You know what I mean? Like you look at A.A. Rashid, his ability to do like canvas work. You know what I mean? And dude wasn't even like rapping up until a few years ago, and he just started putting out these albums and they fire. You know what I mean? He's very artistic. You got Brother Panic, who a lot of people don't know was a beat maker, a producer, working in the hip hop industry. He was, mentored by, like Marley Marl, and he has actual album credits, and he's still making music. You know what I mean? At his own leisure. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, you just look at, Phil Valentine. My understanding is that, he was a singer going back in the 70s. Bobby Hemmett used to design shoes and supposedly was a great shoe designer, of like men's dress shoes.
So I didn't know that.
Everybody, yeah, he's talked about that, I believe. I think it was men's dress shoes.
Wow.
And he was very good. And he left all of that to get into lecturing and teaching us. You know what I mean? So everybody has like some strength in the arts. And I think we need to look at the arts as something that goes alongside our spirituality. There is no spirituality outside of the arts, and there is no arts outside of spirituality. They're all one and the same. So if you're a spiritual person, like get into doing something that's hands-on, get into gardening, get into canvas painting, get into trying to make music. Even if you're not going to put the music out to sell it, start doing something.
Write poetry.
You know what I mean? I'm very poetic in my writing. You know what I mean? Get into the culinary arts.
Horticulture, agriculture, something other than just talking shit online.
Just talking shit, yeah. Remember people. Because here's the reality. I'm not selling information.
No, you're not. I'm
selling art. That's what I'm selling. You can get information on Wikipedia. The information is worthless.
Yeah, that's why I said, like, the way you fuse everything together.
It's how you connect it and how you relate it to your personal experiences. This book is full of my personal experiences, what I saw, what I did. You know what I mean? That's
Last
what
question.
gives it value.
The fetish market. Talk to us about the fetish market, aka ritual market you went to. I don't want to spoil it for the reader, the whole thing. But let's just say this. Matter of fact, I don't want you to get into it because I want people to read it because it's profound. Would you say now in these times the use of spiritual amulets, crystals, Solomon seals, things like that, that we wear, we come into when we come into this knowledge itself. Do you think those things are still as valid as they once were, or as powerful as they once were, as I would say? Or due to the fact that we have more technology, more access to information, more access to the abilities to stir our own kundalini, so to speak, to charge our own energy up, so to speak, that those things should be, I wouldn't say neglected, but for lack of a better term, minimized for the sake of you developing your own ashe, right?
Yeah.
Your own spiritual energy, your own, as I say, your aura electromagnetic field, and make it stronger, which is what I personally believe. But what do you?
Yeah. I think that all of it helps. All of it is valuable. I got spiritual tools from the continent. You know what I mean? I haven't used them as much as I have used them in the past. But I have them. You know what I mean? So I would never say don't use spiritual tools, don't use roots and herbs and things of that
Boom.
nature.
Yeah.
Right. Don't use things of that nature, or tima, as it's called in certain places in Ghana. But
Mhm.
uh, I would not. I would say to continue to use these spiritual tools because, truthfully, I wouldn't be where I'm at now, and I feel like I'm in a very good place. I don't look at myself as no high and exalted grandmaster. I'm just a brother living his life who has a gift for writing and is able to dispense information in a way that is very exciting, very accurate, and very, just enjoyable. And I've been doing that, and I've been doing a good job of that. But I don't present myself as any type of grandmaster. I'm just a man, a human being having his own experiences, and I add a lot of great value to the lives of others in that capacity and in other capacities. But yeah, I would say that uh, use your spiritual tools, wear your amulets. I have amulets also that I possess and have worn. I haven't worn them as much recently because I'm a different space of my spiritual development, and that's more personal. Um, but I'm not really wearing the amulets as I have in the past.
Mhm.
But I support that as well. I definitely support that because it does assist in your spiritual development.
Do you think we should be doing like rituals every month, like moon rituals, things like that, sun rituals, things like that,
I
or
think
is
it's
it
very good.
overdoing it?
I think it's very good to acclimate yourself to specific energies, particularly if you're coming out of a background where that was not a part of your experience. Like, you got to understand, like, I've been at this for a long time. Like, it's 2022. I started my overt journey in 1997, but I can't throw out everything that I experienced under my parents because my mom used to build an altar and set it up for ancestors, and I saw the food. And my dad was telling me stories about the Moors on my way to elementary school. You know what I mean? When I was in second, third grade. So people might say, well, when did you become conscious? I've always been conscious.
Yeah,
Conscious
yeah.
is my life. Even when I was doing dumb shit, I was conscious. So it's all good. And use it until you don't need to use it. It works until it doesn't work. I don't know if that makes sense. It works until it doesn't work no
No,
more.
definitely. Yeah, you
Yeah,
come
and
to
I
a
think
point where
all of it is
you're.
good. But where I'm at right now is that I acknowledge all of these entities, and I also acknowledge a supreme being. That these different entities are extensions of. And
Mhm.
some people might say that that's corny for me to acknowledge a supreme being outside of myself, and I don't care. I still uh, I'm still with that more so now than I was in the past. In the past, I was more dealing with, you know, different spirits and deities, and even saying, no, I'm the God. I'm God. I'm a God. You know what I mean? And just keeping it at that level. And it's funny now. I'm way doper now than when I said I was a God.
Talk that shit, King. Talk it.
I'm more closer to being a God now than I was when I was saying I was a God. And now I still acknowledge my own greatness. My wife will tell you I think I'm pretty dope. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I
you
think
got
I'm
to.
I
That's
think I'm
that's
pretty dope. And she
that's
thinks
the
I'm
proper
very dope.
utilization of the ego. Is
She
that you
think
should always
she
think you
thinks
dope.
I'm very dope too. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
don't get me wrong. I'm aware of myself, but I still acknowledge a higher being. And the reason why that it is because I've come face to face with different divinities face to face, and I was able to realize that I'm dope I'm amazing, I'm all of these different things, but in this manifestation of myself as Adika Butler, I'm not that right now in this space and time. I may be that in a future timeline, but I'm not that. And people might say, "Oh yeah, I've seen that too." No, you haven't. No, you haven't. No, you haven't. Because you would be talking more like how I'm talking.
Now, you sent me, I know that's the last question. This is going to be the last question for real. You sent me to watch X-Men Days of Future Past, right?
Yeah.
Why did you send me to watch that? I know, but I want you to explain so maybe the audience will go back and watch X-Men's Days of Future Past. Why did you send me to watch that? And what is the significance between that and, just your universal understanding of the Days of Future Past?
Yeah, our understanding of time and the whole chronological timeline is
space, you call it.
Yeah, space-time perception. It's not what we've been taught it is, where something happened in the past. I'm talking to you right now, Rob Blackstorm, in the present, and whatever is going to happen in the future is going to happen in the future. And we're going to be talking about it and on social media, and it's going to be trending, and we don't know what that is, and it's in the future somewhere. Everything is happening right now. There's only the now. And that now, that great now, has been divided based upon how we perceive time. It's been divided into past, present, and future. You know what I mean? Which is interesting because water is an element that occupies the past, present, and future. Yeah. How so? All you got to do is study the cycle of rain precipitation and how that works, the science of that. How water leaves the ocean, it rises up into the air, it goes into the clouds, you come to the point of relative humidity where you have a certain amount of heat in the atmosphere, and then it comes back down as rain, and it continues over and over and over again. So water is something, and I shouldn't say an element because it's actually not a pure element. It's H2O, hydrogen, two hydrogen molecules with the oxygen. So water occupies the past, present, and future, and those who have a distinct ability to tap into that past, present, and future stream, they're able to demonstrate the fact that the future is not the future and the past is not the past.
Everything is in the now.
And I've clearly done this, demonstrated this with the fact that I put out my book this year. And while my book is out, you're getting a movie on the Homey The Woman King.
Yeah, I forgot to.
I didn't know that was coming out when I was writing my book. I wrote my book, I put it out. When my book was already with the prints, I started hearing the rumblings that this movie was coming out. Then after my book dropped, they dropped the trailer for this movie about the Homey and the Dahomey Amazons, whom I talk about in this book in great detail. And not only that, in this book, I address propaganda that might be surrounding them. And we're about to see whether or not this propaganda surrounding them is going to be proposed through this movie that's about to come out next month.
I'm sure that's what it's going to be. After reading the book, you're reading your book and looking at the trailer, I'm like,
the trailer drops. Yeah, the trailer
Hopefully they don't. Hopefully they tell the true story because it'll demystify, the agenda that you speak about in the book. But yeah. I thought that was interesting. And I'll never call a certain type of woman an Amazon again. The women I thought were Amazons are not Amazons. What do you think about that statue they put up, though, of the Amazon?
I was about to say that. They put up the statue.
In Benin. I'm like, why would you do that? Why would you do that? But you got to read the book to understand why I'm saying why would you do that. It's not against females or women.
I had no knowledge of any of that. The statue, somebody sent it to me like, yo, they put up a statue. Mm-hmm. Is it a coincidence?
Not at all.
Or am I in tune with what I'm talking about? Am I living and demonstrating what I actually wrote about in this book? You're seeing it play out. Black Panther 2 supposedly is supposedly dealing with an Atlantean storyline where there's Wakanda and Atlantis. It's in here. I talk about Atlantis in here.
Yeah.
Is that a coincidence? I didn't know that.
You already know what I told you. I've seen the vision already. So
a lot of times, conscious people be like, "Oh, I predicted," and they're right, proof. Or they're fudging the truth a little bit. You didn't quite say that back then.
Right.
But here you have undeniable proof that I actually did that. So
yeah.
With no cap and no exaggeration.
Thank you for your time. Tell everybody, well, do you have any last words, first and foremost, that you want to tell the people on this fine Sunday?
Yeah, man, I just want to tell people to just keep learning, keep growing, keep studying. The information, I'm not selling information. I'm selling art and I'm selling perspective. You can get information anywhere at this point. You can get information off of YouTube, Wikipedia, Instagram. I got Instagram posts that are, with no exaggeration, I have Instagram posts, Facebook posts that are just as good as some people's entire lectures.
That's a fact.
That's only because I'm so efficient in the information and I just give you what you need and nothing more.
Adika, you have a wonderful relationship that I see online with you and your wife. And I know I keep saying last question, but this is definitely the last question. I think this is the perfect way to end it. The relationship between you and your wife, what I see, I've complimented you on this offline as well. It's goals for me. You know what I'm saying? Like that type of relationship that I see that you and your wife have. You talk about manhood in this book in a very, very dope, profound way that was very this makes sense. That whole gender war that's online right now where people are beefing with each other and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. What would you tell
Red Pill movement, all of
Red
that?
Pill, MGTOW, Manosphere. Men are complaining about women aren't doing this, women aren't doing that. Is it just that men aren't picking the right women? Let's keep it a buck. Or is there are there other factors? Are there other factors that are causing the disunity? And what should men and women do in order to foster better relationships? What from your perspective, what do you think is missing? You go into it in the book, but just off cuff, just sporadically off the top of the head. What do you think is missing that's leading to this gender war?
It's like what you mentioned about picking better women. It's all of that, but that's not the cause of it. That's just one of the aspects of what we're seeing that a lot of people are dealing with. It's not just women picking better men and men picking better women. It's us totally deconstructing how he was raised. I'll say this. There's a lot of women who came up in an environment where they didn't have their father around. So they're brilliant people. They're intelligent women. They're well educated. They're good people and all of that. But they really don't know what a man is. They don't know what a man is supposed to be. So their concepts about how a man should be is based upon
Oprah and what they see.
Something that they heard or read or something that their mother told them.
Right.
Let me tell you, dear, something about men. Men is this. Mm-hmm. But their mother didn't grow up with a man either. Or the man that they might have grown up with, no disrespect, he might have been a fuckboy.
Right.
So you're basing your whole concept about what a man is and what a man usually does.
Fuckboy psychology.
Your fuckboy father, your fuckboy brother, your fuckboy uncle. You know what I mean? And that's what you're basing it on. And it ain't just that. And a lot of men,
you give a very good blueprint on what men should do.
Oh, these women today, they don't do this, they don't do that. Well, let's say if you had a woman that was willing to be assisting of you and support you and just be supportive of your vision and your dreams. Do you have the vision to really share with her and explain to her like how y'all gonna move? You know what I mean? Are you telling her, I'm the man, I got the penis, so you're supposed to do what I say, and y'all going 50-50 on everything?
You got to have vision.
Yeah. Y'all going 50-50 on, she's supposed to defer to you, but y'all going 50-50 on everything. And she sees you not doing nothing with yourself. You know what I mean? So what do you want her to get behind? You're not doing anything. You go to work, you come home, you watch the game, you drink your beer, you hang out with you're not doing nothing.
You're not doing shit, yeah. And some people think, oh, well, I go to work. A lot of guys is like, oh, I go to work, so you know I'm doing something.
That's it.
And I had to tell my cousin this the other day. I was like, bro, that's not enough. Yeah, you're going to work. Yeah, you're making good money. Yeah, but you come home, all you do, you come home, you pop a beer, and you're watching sports or you're watching something on TV. Of course, it's going to make her, you know, because he caught. Well, I should be out my cousin, but nobody knows who he is. But he caught his girl, you know, in a situation with text messages, innocent, but not so innocent. Put it that way, you know. Right. And I'm like, yes, she's going to be because she's bored. Or you don't have any other vision but working for somebody else. Right. You know, so of course, like you're deferring to somebody else. She's going to defer to you. Have nothing else that you have no purpose but to be a worker. Right. You're not doing nothing. You playing video games. I mean, nothing wrong with playing video games. Video games is dope. I don't play them anymore. But either I don't play anymore. There's nothing wrong with that. But she's not seeing you do dope shit. You go into certain things and like, you know, like it's different when you go to like social venues and people are treating you with reverence. Like, oh, you're somebody. Like, oh, my man, I didn't know my man is like, he's respected in his social circle. You know what I mean? People respect him. I see my man painting. You know, my children see me do things. You know what I mean? My wife sees me do things. Yeah, you know? When they see you writing or when they see you reading, you know, stuff like that, it's important. They see me work, but they see me do things. And it's important to let your children know being smart is cool. You know what I'm saying? Being smart is cool, and to constantly reinforce that, because I think a lot of our kids don't realize. I know that was one of the things I grew up where it wasn't cool to be smart. You know, it wasn't cool to have a lot of intelligence. I think that's also a good thing about the social media era is that, you know, being intelligent is now becoming a thing where you can make, you know, a lot of money as a melanated being or your melanated being, where back in the days, I feel like people was like, they weren't trying to hear anything unless it was like the 90s. 90s was like savagery. That's it. You know what I'm saying? This type of knowledge was not accepted, but we're in a new time. Well, I mean, black pop culture has exhausted itself. Yeah. I mean, that's what's happened, you know? I would say this. Some people might say, Adika, you wildin'. Well, prove me wrong. Prove what I'm about to say wrong. There's nothing imaginative and creative that is potentially paradigm shifting, that has a fresh feel to it. There's nothing going on in black popular culture that is interesting and exciting outside of these conversations that we're having in the so-and-so quote unquote conscious community. There's nothing going on at all. The rap music is not creative. I mean, there's still good music coming out, but it doesn't feel like it's on the ascendant. Yeah, it's more of a depth. It's more of a depth culture now. Yeah, it seems, because at least, you know, in the era I grew up, you know, you had Kane, and you might have a Common, you might have a Poor Righteous Teacher. You got Ice Cube with America's Most Wanted, which I personally think America's Most Wanted is the best fusion of consciousness and street knowledge ever. You know, I think that's the ultimate album. But you had these things, which was, you know, Public Enemy. You don't have those anymore. You got J. Cole, Kendrick, and maybe some couple fringe, and that's it. Everybody else is drilling. But even outside of drilling, or they selling dope, or they killing. Even outside of the hip hop, there's nothing that is amazing and imaginative and exciting and new. And forget about R&B coming out of black popular culture right now, outside of what we're talking about. Nothing. This is the apex of it right now. So I would say that's something to really, you know, look at. Like, I'm looking at TikTok culture and
youth culture and all of it. Most of the stuff that's dope is really retro. The hairstyles, they bring them back to flat tops.
Mm-hmm.
Or they bring them back to flat top where it's a fusion of a flat top and dreads.
Mm-hmm.
We was doing that already in the 90s, the early 90s.
It's over. I even see they trying to bring back baggy clothes. You know,
we was doing that already.
We did that already.
You notice that the throwback T-shirts they're bringing back?
Yes, I saw that recently. Yeah.
That's
throwback jerseys.
We did that already.
Yeah,
What's
we've been
new?
there, done that.
The only thing that's new is the conversations that we're having within the context that we're having. You know what I mean?
I think this next 6 months, Adika, we're going to see a lot of innovation. I think your book is one of the things, but I also feel like just based on the astrology, there's a lot of retrogrades, a lot of things happening. I also believe there's going to be a new Great Depression this year, which is going to force people to create. My personal feeling and my personal vision is that the stock market is going to crash in October. Just based on everything I'm seeing, it just makes sense that there's a world. It's literally
some people talk about similar things, and they've cited the fall from grace. There goes that Lucifer mythology again.
Yeah. So I think that once that happens, it's going to be an unfortunate thing. It's going to change a lot of things. But just like when hip hop was birthed, hip hop was birthed based off of poverty and based off, abject poverty and little opportunities and just a way to be creative. And I think to a degree, Black people in America has gotten comfortable. Even though many things have happened, tragedy keeps happening, like the Trayvon Martin and the police shootings and the Corona and all these different things will happen to try to push us. But I still think we're very, very, very comfortable in this existence. And the shakeup from the stock market crash will force us to move, not only become more creative, but also to come together. Because you can't say, hey, I can't get with this guy because he's not a millionaire, or I can't get with this girl because she doesn't have a fat ass, when you might not have 2 pennies to rub together or 2 crypto coins to put together because you don't have a bank account.
Right. And there's
going
to be
a lot of things. Yeah.
I suspect that there's also going to be a very strong green movement coming out of that we're already seeing. You know what I'm saying? And it's going to be all across the country. It's going to be different communities, Black people, white people. You're already seeing it now, where I remember when I first heard about organic foods in the late 90s, it was like a niche type of thing.
Very, very niche.
Very niche. Now it's like a common thing that, you could have like a gangster thugged out hip hop artist that, is brain dead, and it's like he gets his food organic. He knows what it is. You know what I mean? So I think we're going to be moving to a point where gardening and growing your food and things like that are going to become cool expressions of our culture. That's, like you're going to have like young men and young women where they'll have status based upon their knowledge of gardening and farming.
And how big the garden and the big the farm is. Yeah, that's the future. That's the future that I'm visioning.
And become celebrities in that.
There's going to be like I said, we're in the midst of a shift, and there's going to be a bigger shift of power once this crash happens. I can't say I'm actually looking forward to it, believe it or not. Even though it's going to be a tragedy, it's going to affect a lot of people. It'll probably affect me as far as what I do, but I'm not going to put that on the internet. But let's just say we're all going to be making a big shift soon, and those who are prepared for the shift are going to ride the storm easily, and those that are not are going to be looking for those that are able to ride the storm easily. So it's going to be
ride the head of the serpent.
Yes, exactly. Ride the head of Dan, right? Yeah, but it's going to be an interesting time. I think, Adika, I've kept you for a long time. I thank you for your time, my brother.
Thank you for having me, man.
We could find your book on mindglowmedia.com. Is that correct?
No, it's Mindglow Books.
Mindglow Books. Okay, I put the wrong thing.
So www.mindglowbooks.com.
Mindglow
I should stop. I'm not on Amazon, so I'm not doing business with Jeff Bezos right now. But
you could only get it off. You could only get it on the website, and I think that's good because you put all the money in your pocket. Independent Black business. Exactly. Don't be scared. when you look at the price, y'all, it's worth the money. You know, it's definitely worth the money.
Indeed.
And
Indeed.
yeah, I think
I should say that my retention. This is not my first book, and my retention rate in terms of like people who've bought my book and then they buy the next book, it's pretty high, and there's a reason for that. You know, like I give the value. You know what I mean? I would even say that what I offer is more than what I'm charging.
Yeah, this book is definitely this book right here. I mean, The Treasure of Darkness was great as well, but this joint right here, the Homey,
yeah,
this is a shifter. This is what they call in business a disruptor. You know, this is a disruptor.
Disruptor, yes.
This is a disruptor, and there's not many books. I get books. I hear people talk about books, and I get the book, and I'm like, fuck, I ordered this shit from. But they make it sound so good. But this book right here is concepts that you ain't heard. You ain't hearing online. You're not hearing commonplace deities. Shout out to Dan. Shout out to the deity Tron. Deities I've never heard of. And the way you make it understandable and related, I won't give you an IP on what you related to, but it all makes sense. And they're definitely proud to own this book. I'm proud to have it. People that I know that's into this science, I'm telling them about it. And yeah, I hope you sell 1 million copies, my brother. And
thank you.
Definitely one of the most powerful books that I've read in the last, I'm gonna say, 5 to 7 years, probably.
Wow.
Besides Treasures of Darkness.
Thank you. Treasures of Darkness.
Yeah, that's a class.
I'm gonna bring that back at some point with a different cover.
Yeah, you definitely got to bring that one back. Because of this, I'm actually gonna reread Treasures of Darkness because of how my mind is shifted, and I think I'll understand the concepts a little more. Yeah, but it's definitely a different book than that. Yeah. Definitely a different book. But you went in on that one too. You went on that one too. Adika, hopefully you could do it again, my brother. I'd definitely like to have you in a more of a round table type of thing. So we discuss different concepts. I think that would be dope. It's been a pleasure. It's a
pleasure likewise, man. Likewise. This was a very, very thorough discussion. I really like your questions, and your channel is dope, man. Just keep doing what you're doing. I'm seeing the evolution, and I really appreciate it. And I'm not just saying that because I'm on here right now. I'm on here right now because I like what you're doing.
Man, coming from you, bro. Shit, you're gonna make me go hard on this on YouTube thing, man. Indeed, so look, I appreciate that. Trust me, I appreciate that more than you even know. Coming from you, man.
Indeed, man.
Yourself. So thank you. Indeed. Thank you. All right, we're gonna tap out.
All right.
Peace, power, and prosperity, everybody. Rob Blackstorm, the legend Adika Butler. We out.
All right. Peace.
Peace.